Pepita, welcome to today's live, and we are going to talk today about change management, how to future-proof a business, and specifically an event business, because we have a lot of event professionals tuning in today. You are in the events industry. We met through mutual friends on a previous live, actually, which was about event psychology, and we came to talk about change management. And through our conversation, you brought so many fascinating insights, and I'm so excited to have you here today so we can really deep dive and let all the community also learn from you. So maybe you can introduce yourself, what brings you to the topic of change management, and we dive in straight to the questions.
Thanks, Serena, for inviting me to do this live talk. Yes, you know, we are all kind of interested in change, and I've also been through quite a big change in my professional career, also learning the past year. And I've been part of a fantastic community called the Global Alliance of Reinvention Professionals, which, it's like finding a diet that works. When you find something that works, you can't help but tell everybody about it. So this is why I'm here. I'm here to tell everybody about how you can use the reinvention method to successfully drive change in your business.
So we talk today about change management, and change management is a very big topic. Why do we talk about change management now in 2022?
Well, I think it's a very, very good question. I think in the events industry, we used to change. We're used to being having to change at the last minute, especially for our customers. We used to ash clouds. We are used to terrorist threats. We used to all these external change threats. But over the last 2 years, 3 years, it seems like we just can't keep up with the change, and we're getting exhausted with the amount of change and pivoting we have to do. If it's not the pandemic, it's a new technological advancement. If it's not that, then it's a new competitor. If it's not that, then it's something else. And we have to consider that also business cycles are getting shorter and shorter. So in the past, we've had very, very long cycles. If you think about legacy companies, the average business cycle up until the mid 80s was about 75 years. So you could start as an apprentice in a company, work for 30, 40 years, and retire in that same company without ever seeing a single significant change in that company. Then it shortened a little bit between the 80s and the 90s, or from the 90s to 2000s to about 15 years. And at the moment, we're sitting at an average business cycle from start to decline at about 6 years. So that means that we need to reinvent or pivot or change significantly by the halfway mark before we reach decline.
Wow, that's already a very important insight that you are sharing here. We will come back to this as we go through the questions. I see Laura is on the chat. Hi, Laura. If anyone has questions as we talk, please drop them in the comments because we will get back to them during the live. So today, Pepita, we are going to talk about the Titanic Syndrome diagnostic tool. It's very, very
Yes.
good tool. It gives a company a set of questions that they can ask themselves. We will go to talk more about this tool in the later stage of this live. But before we get into there, let's talk about the trends. What global trends come to mind when thinking about future proofing a business?
Well, when I think about what has been on the forefront of most business or change in most businesses, we think about digital, 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 investing in technology, investing in new forms of AI technology. That has been really, really a big thing that people are looking at, because that's where the whole world is going.
Okay. And what questions come to mind when addressing change readiness in the organization?
Well, when we're talking about change readiness, we need to think about who's ready for the change. Often, when we put together plans, huge change plans, it's not the people who have to execute those changes that actually make the plans. Often, it's the executive or the board members that go off to a retreat and they decide, okay, this is what we're going to be doing, and they put a plan together, a strategic plan, and then they hand it over to another team to maybe design it, but often it just goes from that planning to implementing. So, yeah, this is you dealing with multiple teams of people, multiple departments. So, you need to know if your team is ready, if the individuals are ready for this change, if your team is ready, your department, your company, your business, and then also your industry. And see if your customers are ready for this kind of change.
Yeah, that's a very, very complex topic of who is ready for the change. I know that it often comes from the individuals that they want change, and the question is how to bring this change to the organization. So now let's talk about the tools that can help us execute this change. And one that we are going to talk today about specifically is the Titanic Syndrome diagnostic tool. So tell me everything about it.
So, the Titanic Syndrome diagnostic tool, as the title suggests, comes from the Titanic. And I hope that everybody's seen the movie. It's a very long movie. I haven't seen it twice, it's too long. But when we investigated what happened with the Titanic, what happened with the sinking of the Titanic, we understand that this accident was 100% preventable. When looking at who was responsible for looking out for icebergs, who was responsible for getting messages from warnings from surrounding ships to the captain, all of these things that were put into play, they just ignored it. So if we look at just one little aspect, the guys that were sitting in the crow's nest or looking out for the iceberg, they didn't have binoculars uh, to see the icebergs. They could only see with their bare eyes in the middle of the night. And the binoculars was actually on board, but it was in a glass case. And the person with the key to that glass case had gotten off before the boat had sailed ahead. So, what would it have taken for them to get the binoculars? It was just to break the glass, but nobody broke the glass. So, we can think about, okay, this is protocol. So we don't want to break the protocols. So we're just going to leave that binoculars in the glass case and we're going to try and make do with what we have. So that's one of the things. Another interesting thing that I thought was really silly, but we can think about it very, very deeply and brew over it. There were messages coming in from surrounding ships telling uh, the technicians on the Titanic that there was icebergs ahead, that they had to watch out, they had to veer off course. But when the messages were coming through, the captain told them, "Get off my system." He actually said an expletive, "Get off my system. I'm sending messages to the first class passengers. So get off my system. I don't want to hear from you guys anymore." So he's sending messages to the first class passengers, and by doing that, 1,000 plus lives were lost. When we think about these are first class passengers, it was customer service. Is customer service killing my business? So those are just two aspects. So the Titanic Syndrome diagnostic tool takes a number of scenarios around why the Titanic sank, why it was 100% preventable. So when you're looking at the diagnostic tool, I will post a link to it a bit later. It takes into consideration three areas of change. So the first one is anticipating change, designing change, implementing change. And we often maybe forget. We get so caught up in the strategy part of it, or we get so caught up, okay, we're going to be implementing it now, and we forget the vital parts of it, that where it needs to, everything needs to align. So if I just draw it for you quickly, you have, what did I say? Anticipate, design, implement. So you have this, oh, this scenario over here, and where we want to get is in the middle. So in this little section here, we want to get this sweet spot over here, where we get all three of those elements together. So the Titanic Syndrome diagnostic tool asks very pertinent questions about how ready you are in each phase of change, in each of these phases: anticipating, designing, and implementing.
Yeah, okay. So you will share with us later the link, and there are very, very specific questions that each business can answer for themselves. We have a question from Alan Newton, um, asking, you mentioned AI as technology. A lot of businesses are looking to adopt because of the advancements with the tech and benefits. When executives attend the retreats you referred to earlier, do you think there is thorough enough validation of the challenges to properly inform the solutions?
Well, I can't make judgment on everybody's processes. But when you look at the success of change efforts, and this is not just me saying these numbers and percentages, 75% of change efforts in businesses fail. And this is a huge number. So why are businesses failing at this very, very important action to keep their businesses alive? It's because they haven't addressed all these sections. So what we don't have in this little diagram are three other areas, and that pertains to the people that you are involving in this change, because it's not a machine that's going to change. People are changing. People are making the change in their businesses. So we need to address an individual mindset, the mindset of individuals, the collective mindset of the team, and then the whole system or the ecosystem. So often, to answer your question, often you find that the executives go off and they don't consult the people that need to do the implementing or the designing. Or another a topic for another conversation is they do not understand the customer needs. And this is probably we're going to be touching on it. We've seen many businesses collapse, huge businesses, um, because they do not understand the customer needs. We look at businesses like Blockbuster, national broadcasters. That's not a unique issue to one national broadcaster. So it's a good question, but the evidence is there that there are elements missing in change processes.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you were saying now. So in the beginning, you mentioned that it's a business cycle is about 6 years. How do you keep the fast pace of innovation and experimentation that was introduced during COVID? And do you think that this 6 years business cycle will be reduced then further?
Well, that's a very, very good question, Irina. We're actually conducting a survey at the moment to find out if that cycle has actually reduced. So the last time the survey was done was about 2 years ago, and there was a reduction. There was a reduction to 6 years, and we doing the survey at the moment. We're hoping to get some insights by the end of the week to get a kind of clear idea if it has reduced. There was a question there. Sorry, can't hear you. Can't hear you, Irina.
I can't believe it's happening. And it read that you are on mute. Well navigated and informed answer. Thank you, Pepita. From experience, I get a very similar view of what you said about customer needs and including more stakeholders. Thank you, Alan, for your
Fantastic.
question. Um, yeah, so let's get a little bit practical, yeah, and take an example of the event planner stock that we are doing right now. Event planner stock started as a Twitter chat in 2014, and it's been going since. Yeah, it's been going since in the same format, pretty much, as a Twitter chat every Monday evening for 1 hour. So yeah, it's been going well, Pepita. So I don't have a reason to change. Of course, I've been adding elements, certain elements like live events, virtual events, alive, like we are doing right now. But what do you
Yes.
think? Is it time for me to change radically and say, hey, you've been doing the Twitter chat already too long?
Well, that is a loaded question, Irina. So one of the questions you can ask yourself is this Twitter chat bringing me joy? That's one of the questions you can ask yourself because you're the one that's doing it. Is it bringing me joy? Is it adding life to my system? Do I feel that it's a burden every time it comes to 9 o'clock on a Monday and it's like, oh, I've got to do this Twitter chat again? Or is it like, yeah, I've got to do this Twitter chat again? So depending on the way you answer that question, um, there's your answer. The other thing that we spoke about was what are our customer needs? If you're getting the feedback from your audience that this is something that is needed, that they want to have it regularly, they want more topics to be discussed, there's your answer. So, whenever we talk about change or reinvention in a system, the fundamental question we ask ourselves is this going to add life to the system? So, your system can be anything. Your system can be yourself, can be your family, can be your team, um, is this change going to add life? And if the answer is no, then what's the point in doing it?
Yeah, so luckily I love it. It brings me joy and it gets me to meet people like you and collaborate. So I definitely want to keep it. I am by myself. I'm surprised how long I've been doing this. It's a very simple format, and I see many other businesses that at this point they pivot or stop doing activities such this. And yeah, I'm still doing it, and I'm definitely want to keep it as a core element of the business and build other elements on top of this without removing this kind of core pillar. So yeah, it still brings me joy.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
and that brings us to the next question. So
Yes.
you are a business, and you decided within your, let's say, 6 years period, you decided to create a change. You create a change. You invest in a consulting company. Maybe you do it internally. You bring external people. You do it internally, and then your customers don't like it. The customers don't like the evolution. The customers don't like the direction that you are going. So you lose your core customers that were with you from the beginning. How do you keep your audience? What do you do? How do you navigate the next step?
Well, the question is then, did you implement this change without finding out what your customers wanted? Or did you implement this change with the prospect of getting a new market? So if it's with the prospects of getting a new market, or then you have to weigh up the costs. What is more important, to lose this customer base that is stuck on an old way of doing things, or am I going to go for a new customer base which is growing and is going in the right direction? So often you have to let go. to move forward. There's another that's twofold question, and this is usually like a two hour workshop that we do. We use the Blue Ocean Strategy Canvas, which has been adapted to reinvention, and basically plot, you know, what your customers' needs are. So we have, I'm just going to draw it for you quickly. So we have this canvas. I have a nicer version that I can, that I can share a link for you. I'm not sure if you're seeing it in the right way. If you can
Yes,
read it,
I,
you
I, I
can.
believe I am. Yeah.
Good. So it's very simple. You know, we've got an axis over here. You've got low, medium, and high, and you've got 1, 2, 3, and you can have as many at the bottom. And usually, what we do is put KPIs here at the bottom. So, what was important to your customer? Let's say, for example, before the pandemic. So, if you're an events business and you have customer that was, what would have been important for them? Maybe the food was important for them. Maybe
The
sustainability was
venue,
important. The venue. What else
the
could have been
speakers,
important?
the
The
speakers,
speakers,
the
right? So you
networking.
the networking, and you can go on and on and on and on, right? So if you're taking, okay, I need to know what's the difference now from before the pandemic to after the pandemic. Then you plot, okay, food was really low on or low to medium. What was this again? Sustainability was really high. Uh, what is that? Okay, the venue.
Venue.
Venue was low. And I'm just taking examples. This is don't quote me
Speakers.
verbatim. Speakers were really high. So that was the plot then before COVID. And then you ask yourself, okay, what is the trend now? What are my customers asking me now? It's like they don't care who the speakers are anymore. So it's low. What about the venue? Actually, maybe they're going to do a hybrid
Mhm.
meeting. The venue doesn't matter at all. So
Yeah,
that is okay. That's also low, or maybe it was high there. And wherever you plot it like this, and you see changes, this is where you need to make the most significant change
that's
in
very
the way that you
interesting.
approach your business. We see the highest change. So yeah, with the venue, you don't really have to change much. But with everything else, you need to put some change measure in to meet your customers' needs. So this is how you can ask, you can figure out, am I aligned with what my customer needs? Am I aligned with what's going on out there in the industry?
Yeah.
And pivot yourself in that way.
And what do you think about companies like Apple? When Steve Jobs invented Apple, he came up with the personal computer, the phone. He didn't ask his customers what they need. He he was very visionary to create something that he thinks, believes that customers need. And he was right. No one knew that they need a personal computer. So, well, I mean, the personal computer was there, but a computer like Apple, um, so seamless design that was not existent before. A mobile phone like Apple that was so intuitive. So no one asked for it,
No, nobody asked for
but
it,
he
but
still revolutionized the entire industry.
he did. So we can ask ourselves, am I Steve Jobs? Am I Bill Gates? Am I an innovator? And when you can just ask yourself, if somebody says to you, think outside of the box. If you're an employee and your boss goes, oh, think outside of the box. What emotion does that evoke in you? I know for myself, I'm like, oh, think outside of the why? What's wrong with the box? So this is actually real numbers. We're not all innovators. That is why there are so few Steve Jobs and Bill Gateses out there. It's actually 2% of the world's population are innovators. The rest of us we improve on their inventions, but we are all 100% reinventors. So we can take that box and what's in that box and build on it. We don't have to invent a new box.
Yeah, that's his biography. I can highly recommend reading. That's he went against all the odds and created something that was not imaginable before. Laura is commenting inclusion. Maybe you can add in what context you're talking about inclusion, and then we go to the next question. So change is a very loaded word. It often gets a negative connotation, and there's a lot of resistance to change within an organization or from outside the organization. So how do you address resistance to change?
Yeah. When we think about resistance to change, it's a very natural response. We are hardwired to react when there is a change in our environment. If you had to, now I'm from South Africa and I've been close to a lion before. I've been in a car and the lion's eye right next to me over here. And the adrenaline that went through my body when the lion was here, I cannot describe it to you. So when somebody says, okay, we're going to change something, our bodies react. It's a biological reaction. And adrenaline actually courses through our veins. So we have that response, and we call it the fight or flight response. When somebody says we're going to change, it's not very often people say, oh, yes, we're going to change something. It's usually like, oh, no, what is it now? How much time do I have to put into it? Is it going to be something that we're going to change now and we're going to have to throw it out tomorrow? So, yes, it is an issue. But when we look at it biologically, our bodies are telling us there's something that's wrong here. I need to react. So it's a very, very natural response.
Yeah, it's and how do you address this response? How do you become positive about change?
Well, there is the 90-second rule. So the adrenaline that rushes through your body takes 90 seconds to flush out through your kidneys. And then you should be in a state of like, okay, the lion isn't here. Now what do I do? But for some reason, people stay within that 90 seconds. And the longer they stay there, the harder it is for them to come out of it. So as the people who are perpetrating the change or doing the change, they have to address this fear or this kind of threat in a way where you can eliminate the threat. So if you're thinking about this, when you hear a knock on the window, you're sleeping in the middle of the night and you hear a knock on the window, you're like, what is that? Do I go and look, or do I pull the covers over my head and wait for it to go away, wait for the threat to go away? Um, and when you do go and look and you see that it's a tree, so your fear has been taken away. So we can do a simple exercise where you list your fears. You say, okay, why am I not? And you actually, as a manager or an executive who is implementing the change, you have to be in dialogue with people who have to be making this change. So it can't be something like, okay, they have to do it and they just have to, either stick with it or they have to leave. If you want this to be successful, you need to be in dialogue with your team to help them through the fear of this change. And there are quite a few exercises that you can do, like I say, listing your fears, understanding what you can change, understanding what you can't change, or understanding what you can control rather, We're throwing change around a lot now. Understanding what's out of your control and understanding what's in your control. And when you understand what's in your control, your entire perspective shifts to like, okay, maybe this is not so bad after all. Let's try and do it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You really need to look what's in your control because you can't be in control of everything. So it's really what about under your individual control. Laura, she clarified that when you talked about the evolving needs of the conference, it's about inclusion. When talking about inclusion, can you include also everyone in the change process? That's definitely important, right? When we talk a huge organization, or let's say not even, let's not talk about a big organization because many event companies are actually quite small. So how do you include everyone? Inclusion
Well,
and change.
when you have a small company, of course, it's easy. It's
Mhm.
easier to include everybody. Um, but go into dialogue with your team. Ask them appreciative questions. Ask them generative questions that will bring out the creativity from them. So maybe you're sitting with, oh, we have to include technology. We have to invest in hybrid hardware technology or whatever. But your staff is sitting with some completely different idea, and they're the ones dealing with the customers. But they're saying, no, but the customer's actually asking for this. In 2 years' time, they're wanting to do that, and they, I've read this and that, and that's the trend for the next 2 years. And when you are going to dialogue with your staff, you may find out that what you are wanting to change may not be necessary, or that they may come up with some really, really creative idea. So, definitely, the dialogue is important. When you're in a bigger organization, you have to get really organized with who you're talking to, and getting the buy in. So, how do you get that's the question, how do you get the buy in from maybe your department heads? And that's also all about the fear exercise, getting rid of those fears. And when you ask the generative questions, I hate to say this, but it's like when it sounds like something is somebody else's idea. So the person who's in that fear state or that resistant state, that's a natural state that they are in because they're afraid of this change. There's nothing wrong with them. It's not because they're being difficult. They don't know how to handle it. And when you take that fear away and you say, oh, but I thought maybe this would be an idea. When you look at it like that, maybe that's an idea. And when you get their buy-in that that's their idea and you bring it into the process, you are creating an inclusive environment for that change.
Yeah, I love your answer. Yeah, I also remember hearing something, sometimes changing the language. So instead of talking about change management, you can say this project, it's a pilot, it's an experiment.
Yes.
So just use different language. Okay, so we're coming to our last question. And if anyone has questions, please ask now so we can still answer it on the live. Otherwise, you can get in touch with Pepita anytime after that. So now, let's say we're in a company and we know what has to change because we ask our customers, we discussed internally. Where do we start?
Where do we start? Well, we need to start with change readiness. Sometimes we want to start with the what. Oh, I've found this new thing that we're going to use. Usually it's not the what. Like I said before, you can Google 101 different good ideas. Um, the question is when. When should we change? When should we implement this? We just uh, introduced a new financial system 6 months ago, and now we want to introduce something else. Is it too much? Or is it necessary? Is it, if I don't introduce it, is it going to kill my business? So these are all the things, the questions that you need to ask yourself. But definitely starting with how change ready we are. The Titanic diagnostic tool is a fantastic way to do it. And from there, you build on all the exercises through your change process, addressing the fear, addressing your customer needs, um, finding when you understand what your customer needs are, what what are the actions that is going to have the most impact. So you don't have to take every single good idea that you've come up with. Maybe you're not financially ready for it. Maybe your team doesn't have the right training. Maybe your customers are not ready for it. So you need to choose the actions that will have the most impact. And from there, create a plan, create a strategy. And we also have a tool for strategy, which is the Stellar tool, which is being used by many organizations, that has borrowed a little bit from Agile Scrum sprints. So instead of having like a yearly review of your budget or whatever you've implemented, you have rolling reviews so that you are able to change what doesn't work, throw out what doesn't work, add new things, or maybe focus on one area. So there's a logical process to this, and sometimes we skip steps, and that's why our change processes don't work.
Yeah, I love your answers. They're so thought-provoking and also make you aware that you have to think about this strategically about change management. It's not that, okay, we need to change something, let's do it. It's a process. You have to approach it very strategically. And I loved how you talked about the specific time frames that you have to address change. You said 6 years, and then at the 3 years mark, you have already to think about change management. In the past 2 years, I think many companies have really reinvented themselves, pivoted, tried new things. I think the level of experimentation was so high, and I think we should keep it up. Constantly try new initiatives and see what works, and if it works, then leverage on this, do more of it, and see how also customers react to this, how the community reacts to this. You talked about attracting new audience. I think as a business, we always need to think about new customers and not just the existing customer base, because in order to grow, our customers also evolve, and we need also to look at the needs of the next generation of the customers, evolving needs of the current customers. So there are many aspects to take into consideration. So that's all for today, Pepita. Thank you very much for all your insights, and we will continue this conversation. On the 15th of March, we are hosting a webinar with two other colleagues who have a very great experience in change management, Heidi Legain from the Mice Guru and Gernot Marx from the Salzburg Convention Bureau. So we will talk about change management from different perspectives. I will share a link to this webinar in the comments here after this live. So please join us. It will be a more interactive discussion where we also will invite the audience to join and share their perspectives with us on the screen. Pepita, how can people get in touch with you?
You can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. I'm actually going to share my LinkedIn. Yes, here we go. 2 seconds for me. Let's do this. Where are we? Share my LinkedIn connection. You can definitely get in touch with me there. Please, yeah, anything. Send a message, send a direct message, or just connect with me, and I will chat with you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I wish you, everyone, a great afternoon. And we'll
Thanks,
see you at the
Celine.
next live.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.